Lawrence now dressed as an Arab. He asked his mother for help with his costume.
If that silk headcloth with the silver ducks on it, last used, I believe, as a tablecloth, still exists, will you send it out to me? Such things are hard to get here now.
Capturing Turkish-held Jerusalem was a key British objective in 1917. Seizing the port of Aqaba would strengthen the Arabs' case for a role in the campaign. Lawrence realized that all Aqaba's guns pointed out to sea. The town was defenseless from the rear. That meant a 600-mile ride across the Hejaz at the height of summer.
Mudflats are purgatory. Sun reflects from them like mirror, flame yellow, cutting into our eyes.
Seven weeks later, the Arab force reappeared outside Aqaba, catching the Turks totally off guard. The town fell just 4 days later. The Middle East was stunned. General Allenby, commanding British forces in the region, now wrote the Arab revolt into his Jerusalem campaign, reinforcing it with armoured cars, air support, artillery and colonial troops. On the 11th of December 1917, Allenby entered Jerusalem on foot with his officers, including Lawrence. The Arabs would find they had won not self-rule, but new masters. Lawrence had known all along that the Arabs of the Hejaz were merely the tools of British subversion, as he admitted long after.
The Arabs saw in me a free agent of the British government and demanded from me an endorsement of its written promises. So I had to join the conspiracy and assured the men of their reward. I was continually and bitterly ashamed. Had I been an honest advisor of the Arabs, I would have advised them to go home and not risk their lives fighting for such stuff.
While Britain was sponsoring subversion against Germany's ally Turkey, she had her own weak spot right on her doorstep: Ireland. Britain had promised Ireland home rule, but the First World War shelved all that. 200,000 Irishmen, Catholics and Protestants, would fight for Britain. About 30,000 of them would die. But the Irish Republican Brotherhood, forerunners of the IRA, believed England's difficulty was Ireland's opportunity. Padraig Pearse saw the war as a chance for Ireland to free herself from British rule.
The European war has brought about a crisis which may contain, as yet hidden within it, the moment for which generations have been waiting. It remains to be seen whether, if that moment reveals itself, we shall have the sight to see and the courage to do.
Germany, for many Republicans, had always been a good place to plot revolution. Erskine Childers was famous in Britain, the country he now sought to undermine. His best-selling novel, The Riddle of the Sands, had warned Britain of the dangers she faced from the German Navy. By July 1914, his sympathies had switched. He put to sea in his yacht, the Asgard, to run guns. He photographed the operation, leaving Hamburg under tow. Sailing back to Ireland, his wife and a friend with 2 of the 900 rifles they had collected from Germany. And the scene after Childers docked outside Dublin. Crowds cheer as the guns are driven away by car. Two years later, the German guns were put to use when 1,600 Irish revolutionaries rose up in Dublin.
Easter Monday, 1916. Sinn Féiners occupy railway stations, the GPO, and other places. They have blocked the streets nearing Stephen's Green and are shooting at anyone they see in khaki. We used to think we were clear of the war here in Ireland, but we've certainly got it close enough now.
The moment for which Padraig Pearse had been waiting had come. He read out the historic proclamation of the Irish Republic, a document which acknowledges the support of gallant allies in Europe. Who were these gallant allies, and what had they done? Germany had long seen subversion in Ireland as a way of destabilizing Britain. In August 1914, Sir Roger Casement, an Irish Republican and one-time darling of the British establishment, gave the Germans the opportunity they were looking for. He wrote to the Kaiser with an offer.
We draw your Majesty's attention to the part that Ireland necessarily, if not openly, must play in this conflict. Ireland must be freed from British control. Thousands of Irishmen are prepared to do their part to aid the German cause, for they recognize that it is their own.
Casement sailed for Berlin in disguise, and in the winter of 1914, he met Arthur Zimmermann, a future foreign minister, and the man in charge of Germany's subversive operations. Zimmermann was impressed by Casement and began to wonder if a small German landing on Irish soil might cause the British massive problems. His diplomats in America raised funds from the Irish community in New York.
It is proposed to undertake an invasion with 25,000 troops with 50,000 extra guns. Then undoubtedly the cooperation of all Irish in the British Army will follow. There is strong friction between Irish and English in northern France.
Zimmermann's uprising was to be four-pronged. The dispatch of German weapons to Irish rebels, the landing of a German expeditionary force on the west coast, German submarines to seize Dublin harbour, and diversionary Zeppelin bombing raids on London. Germany's high command got cold feet and refused to commit an invasion force. But in April 1916, the Zeppelin raids did take place. A submarine was sent to the west coast, and an arms boat carrying 20,000 rifles, 10 machine guns and 1 million rounds of ammunition was dispatched for Ireland under the command of Captain Carl Spindler.
Gradually rising out of the water was Inishtushkat Island, our rendezvous. Within half an hour at the latest, the pilot boat must make her appearance.
But the Irish expected him 2 days later, so the Germans sat in the bay till caught by a British patrol. Captain Spindler scuttled his boat rather than surrender the arms.
The German naval ensign was run up, bidding defiance to the British. Then there was a muffled explosion. Beams and splinters flew up in the air. The Oud sank with a loud hissing noise.
The uprising's hope of success sank with the German arms. Many rebels now abandoned the project. But a hardcore minority, armed with the rifles Childers had brought in from Hamburg 2 years before, decided to make a symbolic gesture of defiance. On Easter Monday 1916, they seized key points in Dublin. The British responded with machine guns and artillery fire and shipped in 10,000 men from the mainland. Few Dubliners mourned the crushing of the rebellion. Guinness brewer Edward Phillips had his disused boilers converted into improvised armoured cars for the British.
Rang up military and offered motor lorries, gladly accepted. Sent out for drivers who lived close, they all consented.
Over 1,000 civilians were caught in the crossfire. And as the British took the rebels into custody, the people of Dublin pelted them with vegetables and emptied chamber pots over their heads. Many had sons and fathers fighting on the Western Front and were outraged by the uprising's German connections. But now the British made a terrible blunder, throwing away their moral authority and transforming the Easter Rising into the seminal event of Irish statehood. They sentenced the leaders of the uprising to death, starting with Pearse. He admitted to the court,
I asked for and accepted German aid in the shape of arms and an expeditionary force. My aim was to win Irish freedom.
Over 10 days, the men were brought into the execution yard at Kilmainham Jail and shot. James Connolly was so wounded in the uprising that he had to be shot sitting down. Dublin fell silent as Britain turned 16 men into martyrs. People who had thrown rotten fruit at them now saw them as heroes. Britain turned the failed uprising into a national cause. Zimmerman's next challenge was in a different league. Could Germany exploit Russia's revolution of March 1917 to lever Russia out of the First World War? Almost all the ingredients were in place. A major civilian uprising, restless troops at the front, and a toothless leadership in the rear. The Germans lacked just one piece of the jigsaw, a charismatic leader. But they had someone in mind. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin was leader of the Bolsheviks, a small group of extreme Russian radicals. They'd spent many hours over the past 14 years plotting revolution in coffee houses and prison cells. When at last it came, they were caught on the hop. Stalin was in Siberia, Bukharin was in New York, and Lenin was in Zurich. What torture it is for us, Lenin wrote, to be sitting here at such a time. He knew the Allies would never allow him passage. The obvious route lay through Germany and Sweden. But would